The blood rushed to my fingertips as I stared at the message glowing on my cracked phone screen. Your place is not here. Don't come back. The words, sent from someone who was supposed to love me, cut deeper than any knife could. I read them again and again, as if repetition would somehow dull the sting, but the ache only grew sharper. My name is Julian Cross, and that was the day I realized my family had chosen to erase me from their lives. I wasn't perfect, but I wasn't a monster either. I had dreams, ambitions, and a will to stand on my own. But instead of supporting me, my family branded me as a disappointment, someone unworthy of their time, their love, or even their last name. When I tried to explain myself, when I begged them to hear me out, they didn't just shut the door. They slammed it, locking me out of everything I once called home. I left with nothing more than a backpack, a few crumpled bills, and the weight of betrayal pressing against my chest. Nights were the hardest. I would lie on a bench under the flickering light of a street lamp, staring up at the indifferent stars, wondering how people who claimed to be bound by blood could cast me aside like a stranger. My stomach growled more often than it was full, and the cold concrete beneath me was my mattress. I wanted to give up, to vanish into the same oblivion my family had pushed me toward. But something deep inside whispered otherwise. You are more than what they see. That whisper became my anchor. I picked up odd jobs wherever I could, washing dishes in grimy diners, carrying boxes in suffocating warehouses, even scrubbing toilets in buildings where people wouldn't dare look me in the eye. Each dollar I earned felt like a battle won. Every drop of sweat was proof that, though the world had tried to bury me, I was still clawing my way up. And slowly, I began to save. One evening, exhausted from a double shift, I sat at the back of a library trying to escape the biting winter air. My hands were raw and cracked, but as I wandered through the shelves, I found books on business, marketing, and finance. I had always been curious, but now that curiosity turned into survival. I devoured every page, every lesson, every story of people who had built something from nothing. If they could do it, why couldn't I? That library became my classroom, and those books became my silent mentors. By day, I worked to stay alive. By night, I studied to change my future. I scribbled notes on scraps of paper, filling them with ideas I barely understood at first, but grew to master with time. There were nights I nodded off at the desk, my head resting on paragraphs about investments or strategies, but I never stopped learning. The turning point came when I stumbled into a chance conversation with a stranger at a coffee shop. He was a small business owner struggling to reach customers online. I listened carefully, and though my voice trembled with uncertainty, I offered him a few suggestions based on what I had learned. To my surprise, he tried them, and they worked. A week later, he came back, thanking me with a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. He paid me for my advice, not much, but enough to ignite a spark inside me. That was the beginning of my journey as a consultant. Word spread, slowly at first, but momentum grew. One client turned into two into five, and soon I found myself building something far greater than I had ever imagined. I rented a tiny room, no more park benches or borrowed library chairs, and filled it with secondhand furniture and a laptop that hummed louder than a train. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Still, the ghosts of betrayal haunted me. Every milestone, every step forward, I carried the memory of their rejection. It could have crushed me, but instead, I let it sharpen me. I promised myself I would succeed not just in spite of them, but because of them. Their silence fueled my determination, their absence carved out space for resilience, and their betrayal laid the foundation for my rebirth. Years passed, and what began as small consulting gigs blossomed into a company. I hired people who reminded me of myself, overlooked, underestimated, dismissed. I gave them the chance no one gave me. Together, we built strategies that transformed struggling businesses into thriving ones. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were shaping futures. The day I stood in front of my first office building, keys in hand, I felt the weight of every hardship that brought me there. The cold nights, the rejection, the hunger, it all led to this moment. My name, Julian Cross, was etched into the glass door, a symbol that I had carved my own place in the world, a place no one could deny me. It wasn't until much later that I saw my family again. Not by choice, but by fate. I was invited to speak at a conference on entrepreneurship. As I walked onto the stage, applause filling the air, I spotted familiar faces in the crowd. My parents. My siblings. The very people who told me I didn't belong. Their eyes widened, and I could see the storm of emotions swirling in them. Disbelief, regret, maybe even pride. For a moment, the younger version of me wanted to scream, to ask them why they abandoned me when I needed them most. But instead, I took a deep breath and shared my story. I told the audience about betrayal, about nights spent homeless, about how the world had tried to erase me but failed. I spoke of resilience, growth, and the power of never giving up. I didn't mention their names, but every word was a mirror held up to them. When the speech ended, the applause thundered louder than I had ever heard. Strangers came up to shake my hand, to thank me, to tell me that my story gave them hope. My family stayed back, hesitant, their pride clashing with shame. But I didn't need their validation anymore. I had built my own identity, one forged from fire and persistence. Later that night, as I sat alone in my hotel room overlooking the city lights, I finally felt the peace I had been chasing all these years. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need them to beg for forgiveness. My success was enough. My survival was enough. I was enough. And in that moment, I understood something profound. Sometimes, being cast out is the greatest gift, because it forces you to find strength you never knew you had, to build a life on your own terms, and to rise higher than anyone ever expected you to. My name is Julian Cross. I was betrayed, broken, and left behind. But I chose to rise, and in rising, I reclaimed my place in the world. And if you're listening to my story, feeling like the world has turned its back on you, remember this. You are not defined by those who abandon you. You are defined by the choices you make after the fall. Stand tall, fight through the darkness, and build the life they said you couldn't. Because if I can do it, so can you. If this story touched you, don't let it end here. Share it with someone who needs hope. Subscribe for more stories of resilience. And remember, your journey is just beginning. The world might try to break you, but you hold the power to rise again.